We're live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India News, India's voice to the world. I'm Lipakshi Khurana. Coming up in the next hour. Israel says its troops have completed encirclement of Gaza City. United Nations says 4 schools turned shelters in the Gaza Strip damaged in past 24 hours.
The battle is ongoing as we have planned. In each battle, we have the upper hand.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to visit Israel and the Middle East says need to set conditions for durable, sustainable peace for Palestinians, Israelis alike. Innovation and strength of Indian food processing industry to be showcased at the World Food India 2023 beginning today. At least 7 people dead as Storm Ciaran brought chaos to Western Europe. Schools closed, train services shut down and hundreds of flights cancelled. And in Cricket World Cup, India enters semi-final after demolishing Sri Lanka by 302 runs. Afghanistan to take on the Netherlands today. And on to the details now. It's the day 27 of the Israel-Hamas conflict as Israel continues to press their assault against the terrorists. Its military says it has completed the encirclement of Gaza City. Army spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said saying the offensive into the enclave was going according to plan. He added that forces had been attacking outposts, headquarters and other infrastructure being used by Hamas.
The forces continue to dismantle the front defense lines of Hamas in the northern Gaza and to take control of central areas. We continue to intensify our operations and to advance according to plan and to the targets that we have set. The battle is ongoing as we have planned. In each battle, we have the upper hand, and that's how we move forward.
Well, on its northern border with Lebanon, Israel's Hagari said troops remained on high alert to tackle any threat coming across the border.
We continue to fiercely defend our northern border and to strike from the air and land any attempt to shoot or infiltrate into Israel. I want to highlight that Israel Defense Forces is on high preparedness to respond to anyone who attempts to destabilize the security situation in the north. We are highly prepared on the northern border.
Meanwhile, amidst fear of conflict spreading to wider region, Israeli troops and tanks held live-fire drills in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights on Thursday. The heights were part of Syria until 1967, when Israel captured most of the area in the Six-Day War, occupying it and annexing it in 1981. That unilateral annexation was not recognized internationally, and Syria demands the return of the territory. Israel's government says it also fears that Iran, an ally of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, is seeking to establish itself permanently on the Syrian side of the border in order to launch attacks on Israel. And DD India correspondent Amritpal Singh sends us this report on the current ground situation.
Fierce fighting continues in the Gaza Strip as the Israeli army continued to pound targets, hitting the Jabalia refugee camp and also the Bureji refugee camp, saying that this is where the members of the Al-Qasim Brigade, the militant wing of the Hamas, are hiding. Meanwhile, the Israeli tanks have encircled the Gaza city. They are at the Gaza gates of the Gaza city, and fierce fighting is said to be on. Close combat is said to be on between the Hamas fighters and the Israeli forces. Israel announced the killing or the death of its battalion commander, the senior-most officer lost in the war so far. Till now, about 18 soldiers have been killed since Israel went in for a ground invasion. Meanwhile, the civilian casualties keep going up. The figure being put is well over 9,100, and about 33,000 are said to be injured. Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip continues to become bad by the hour, with 16 out of 35 hospitals shutting down, including the Indonesian hospital, the Turkish Palestinian Friendship Hospital, because their generators have run out of fuel. Al-Shifa is hours away from shutting down, and the Al-Quds hospital, the surrounding areas of the Al-Quds hospital was bombarded by Israeli airstrikes. So the war is entering its next phase, with things becoming even more difficult for civilians, and it will continue to intensify in the days to come. Amritpal Singh for DD India.
Well, underscoring rising concerns, U.S. Secretary of State Antony will be flying into a diplomatic maelstrom between Israel and Jordan on Friday. This is the latest of many trips he has made to the region following the Hamas attack and subsequent conflict. The U.S. is pushing for more humanitarian pauses rather than a full ceasefire, despite calls from the UN and aid agencies for more help for civilians in Gaza. Caroline Malone reports from Washington.
US Secretary of State Blinken is in Israel from Friday and is due to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. He said just before leaving the US on the trip that he will push for more humanitarian pauses to continue to allow aid in and hostages out of Gaza, and to work on a more durable peace for the region.
Do we advocate pauses by both sides here, temporary, localized, to be able to get Americans out? To be able to get aid in? You betcha we do. That doesn't mean that we're calling for a general ceasefire. Hang on a second. There's a difference. There's a big difference here. And we understand that, as I said earlier, humanitarian pauses have to be negotiated, and you have to have a credible basis for doing it in a temporary, localized way.
US President Biden has said that he got Israel to pause its attacks on Gaza to allow some of its citizens taken hostage out safely. Around 80 US citizens have also been able to get out of the Rafah border crossing into Egypt.
And so we will be talking about concrete steps that can and should be taken to minimize harm to men, women, and children in Gaza. And this is something that the United States is committed to. I'm not going to get into the details here, but it's very much on the agenda.
The US supports Israel's right to defend itself, but there are calls from UN aid groups and even lawmakers for support for civilians in Gaza.
We are going to continue to stand with Israel's right to defend itself. And let's be clear and never forget what happened on October 7th, where hundreds, thousands, 1,400 innocent people were killed, slaughtered, young people who were simply attending a concert. And so we are not going to create any conditions on the support that we are giving Israel to defend itself.
The House has just pushed forward a Republican written bill that ties $14 billion in aid to Israel to domestic spending cuts. But several Democrats in the House have also introduced a resolution for an immediate de-escalation and ceasefire in Israel and occupied Palestine. Blinken did also reiterate that democracies like the US and Israel have a responsibility to protect innocent civilians, and that is very much on the agenda, as is talk of a lasting peace, a two-state solution for security for Israelis and Palestinians. Caroline Malone in Washington for DD India.
While Chilean and Colombian governments recalled their ambassadors to Israel for consultations after Israel violated international humanitarian law in the Gaza Strip. Chile called for a ceasefire and the passage of humanitarian aid into the zone and said Israel was violating international law. Colombian President Gustavo Petro called the attacks a massacre of the Palestinian people. Other Latin American neighbors, such as Mexico and Brazil, have also recently called for a ceasefire. Moving on, the United States on Thursday announced a new range of sanctions on more than 100 entities against Russia over the war in Ukraine. The latest restrictions target Russia's future energy capabilities, sanctions evasion, and a suicide drone that has been a menace to Ukrainian troops and equipment, among others. The Biden administration on Thursday added a dozen Russian companies to a trade blacklist for supporting Russia's military. The U.S. also cracked down on sanctions evasion in the United Arab Emirates, Turkey and China. 7 Russian-based banks and dozens of industrial firms were also hit with sanctions by the Treasury Department. The latest measures target a major entity involved in the development, operation and ownership of a massive project in Siberia known as Arctic 2 LNG, the State Department said in a statement. U.S. also targeted the Kubla and Lancet suicide drones being used by the Russian military in Ukraine. Washington has stepped up diplomatic pressure on countries and private companies globally to ensure enforcement of the barrage of sanctions it has unleashed on Moscow. Well, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky hailed U.S. measures imposed on Thursday against Moscow as what is needed. In his nightly video address, Zelensky said that every sanction decision must work in full so that there is no chance for Russia to bypass the sanctions.
Grateful to the United States for a new and very powerful sanction decision. More than 220 Russian and not only Russian entities that working for aggression are now under US sanctions. This is what is needed. Critical sectors of the economy for the aggressor, sensitive schemes for terrorists, and every sanction decision must work in full so that there is no chance for Russia to bypass the sanctions. The power of sanctions is the power of the world. We constantly communicate with our partners for this purpose. The united world must only become stronger.
Meanwhile, Russian drones hit civilian targets and triggered a fire early on Friday in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. Officials said they were clarifying whether there were any casualties. Kharkiv Mayor Ihor Terekhov said the fire was being brought under control. The Ukrainian Air Force said Russian drones were still in the air in areas outside Kharkiv and warned of possible attacks in western Ukraine, including Lviv region on the Polish border. And U.S. President Joe Biden will host leaders from Latin America and the Caribbean at the White House on Friday for the inaugural America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity Leaders Summit. The main focus of conversation will be migration, as a record number of people are making their way to the U.S. southern border. In a bid to stem the flow, the Biden administration is expected to announce fresh funding for countries hosting migrants. Tony Waterman has more from Texas.
The Biden administration has long maintained that the best solution for the migrant crisis is to create economic opportunity in Latin America so migrants don't feel compelled to head to the U.S. in the first place. And this funding announcement expected later today is meant to do exactly that. According to Reuters, the U.S. will expand its contributions to the Inter-American Development Bank, which promotes economic development in the region, and it will create new financing platforms for countries hosting migrants. Money that, along with funding from the private sector and donors, could help build out competitive regional supply chains, especially in industries like clean energy, semiconductors, and medical supplies. Not only could this money spur economic opportunity and thus reduce migrant flows, White House officials, according to Reuters, hope it could also blunt China's growing influence in the region. President Biden is expected to make the announcement during a summit with leaders from Latin America and the Caribbean at the White House on Friday. It's been more than a year since Biden signed a non-binding declaration with 20 regional countries to address the crisis, yet near record numbers of migrants continue to cross the U.S. southern border, straining resources not just in the U.S., but in every country the migrants pass through along the way. Tony Waterman in Austin, Texas, reporting for DD India.
And still to come on DD India News Hour. Aiming to acquaint the world to rich Indian food culture and attracting investments in the food processing sector, second edition of World Food India to begin from today. Delhi witnesses record levels of pollution with air quality index in Delhi and the neighbouring towns breaching the danger levels. And in the Indian northeastern state of Meghalaya, people of Khasi community celebrated annual festival Shad Nongkrem.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution.
This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Ciaran, and moving on, India is all set to host the second edition of World Food India from 3rd to 5th November in the national capital, New Delhi. Partnering with Netherlands, this edition will have Japan and Vietnam as focus countries. The event will witness the presence of both the Indian President and the Prime Minister. Attracting food processing sector, the government expects an investment of more than 75,000 crore rupees.
वर्ल्ड फूड इंडिया में हमारे 11 केंद्रीय मंत्रालयों का इसमें भागीदारी है और उनसे संबंधित जो भी हमारे संगठन हैं उन सब ने इसमें हिस्सेदारी करने का फैसला किया है। जो देश में उसके बाहर जो देश इसमें हमारे सहयोगी हैं या भागीदार हैं उनकी संख्या 16 है, जिसमें नीदरलैंड हमारा पार्टनर कंट्री के तौर पर है और जो फोकस कंट्रीज है वो जापान और वियतनाम है।
Moving on, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is in Italy, where he had comprehensive and productive meeting with Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani. Two leaders conversed about deepening strategic partnership and agreed that potential in agro-tech, innovation, space, defence and the digital domain should be explored. At the meeting, Jaishankar spoke about the West Asia situation, Ukraine conflict and the Indo-Pacific landscape in detail. He also appreciated Italy's support for India's initiatives and also for the G20 presidency. At the end of the talks, two sides inked the Mobility and Migration Partnership Agreement and the Cultural Exchange Programme. And Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman called on Sri Lanka's President Ranil Wickremesinghe on Thursday during the three-day visit to the island nation. During the meet, she highlighted that the vision document on economic partnership adopted during his visit to India in July 2023 will further strengthen the country's maritime, air, digital, energy and people-to-people connectivity. Wickremesinghe also emphasized on Sri Lanka's vision to build a new market economy with focus on tourism, sustainability, agricultural modernization and digitization, and welcomed collaboration with India in these areas. And in a significant development for the Indian expatriate community in the United Arab Emirates, India's Union Minister Dharmendra Pradhan held a meeting with the principals of Central Board of Secondary Education affiliated schools in Dubai. The announcement of opening a new administrative office in UAE was made during the meeting. The decision holds the promise of further strengthening educational ties between India and the UAE and fostering a sense of unity within the Indian community in the region. The minister acknowledged the diverse nationalities within CBSE-affiliated schools in Dubai and commended their contribution to Indian academia and culture. Also, India signed a memorandum of understanding with UAE to promote skilled international workforce mobility for Indian nationals with a specific focus on the Gulf countries. India's National Skill Development Corporation of India will collaborate with UAE's EFS Facilities Services Group to develop co-branded skilling institutions to equip Indian nationals with the skills needed for international and local employment and to create access to approximately 5,000 overseas jobs over the next 3 years. areas. The MOU was signed in the presence of India's Education Minister, Dharmendra Pradhan. Well, a two-day G20 Standards Dialogue 2023 is being hosted by the Bureau of Indian Standards under the aegis of India's G20 presidency. The event commenced on Thursday at the iconic Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi. Ashwini Kumar Chaubey, Minister of State for Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution, Environment, Forest and Climate Change, inaugurated the event. The theme of this G20 Standards Dialogue is Zero Defect, Zero Effect. The event will conclude on 3rd of November with remarks from Honorable Union Minister of Commerce and Industry, Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution and Textile, members of G20 national standard bodies and invitee delegates. And now let's take a look at other stories making news today. Enforcement Directorate leaves the House of Delhi Minister Rajkumar Anand after conducting raid for 22 hours. The raid was conducted on the civil lines residence of Minister on the charges of custom evasion and illegal international transactions. The residents of Bastar district in the Indian state of Chhattisgarh are going to vote for the first time in assembly polls in 40 years. The 40 villages in the district were highly affected by the Naxalites, and due to security reasons and complex geographical conditions, polling stations were not established in these villages. The voting in the region will be held on November 7th in the first phase. In the northeastern state of Meghalaya, people of Khasi community celebrated annual festival Shatnong Krem. The festival is a time-honored tradition that revolves around the form of dance and seeks blessings from the Almighty for a bountiful harvest. It offers a unique opportunity for both locals and visitors to immerse themselves in the rich tapestry of Khasi customs. In the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir, the Gandarbals, Sonamarg and other highland areas in the valley recently received fresh snowfall, while the plains received light rains on Thursday, causing a drop in the temperature. And moving on, Rishikesh Amit Naik, who studies mechatronics, robotics and automation engineering at VIT Chennai campus, has discovered a technology to enrich Indian agriculture by identifying pest and damage to crops in advance. Using AI technology, he has developed a method to detect crop pest through thermal imaging. This technology is called Kisan No, and it has been proven effective and at a cost of less than $1.
With the help of a thermal imaging system, it is now possible to find out which pests and diseases are affecting the crop.
Kisan No is an AI-based pest detection and plant disease detection system that uses artificial intelligence in its core. It uses thermal red images taken from satellites to predict plant diseases and pests.
Researchers said that by doing chemical testing of the crop leaves given by the farmers, they are able to find out about the diseases of the crop. This process takes about a week, by which the time possibility of a crop failure increases.
Talking about the impact of Kisan No first of all provides crop health status of what the crop health is, if there is any pest attacks or plant diseases. Also, it provides data about irrigation status if any particular area of the crop field needs irrigation. It also provides other resources like what fertilizers to be used, when to be irrigated, and overly everything. So a controlled environment provides better outcomes and better results for the crop harvest. Second, due to early prediction system that our mechanism uses, we can actually reduce the usage of pesticides and fertilizers that are being overused currently.
So he came up with another idea and started gathering information through satellite images. Satellite images provide them with information about vegetative index and moisture index, which is very useful in detecting crop damage. Earlier, they had to face difficulty due to blur of satellite images. He explains that using HAB to capture real-time air samples and perform RNA sequencing in the stratosphere, we aim to reduce our dependence on satellite. This data integrated with the airflow, temperature and radiation.
Currently, we are working around mechanisms and technologies combined with artificial intelligence and high-altitude balloons to predict not only plant diseases but also human-borne diseases that those bacteria that are present in the upper atmosphere.
Well, growth in India's gross goods and services tax GST revenues reached 1,702.3 crores in October, the second highest since the rollout of this indirect tax regime. A pickup in consumption and economic activity, along with the growing automobile sector and the use of digital UPI transactions, are likely to have contributed to the sharp rise.
India's robust economic position has received a boost with a record collection of gross GST revenue. GST revenue for the month of October 2023 is 13% higher than that in same month last year. The average gross monthly GST collection in the financial year 2023-24 now stands at Rs 1.66 lakh crore and is 11% more than that in the same period in the previous financial year. The gross GST revenue collected in the month of October 2023 is Rs 1,72,003 crore, out of which 30,062 crore is CGST, Rs 38,171 crore is SGST, Rs 91,315 crore is IGST, and Rs 12,456 is cess. The average gross monthly GST collection in the financial year 2023-24 now stands at Rs 1.66 lakh crore.
First festival seasons are lined up. Therefore, naturally, the production and all the private sector, the players, normally they go for extended manufacturing and warehousing of goods. So that's a very positive development for the Indian economy being on the buoyancy. So, all the global multilateral agencies which have been predicting that India is going to be one of the fastest, the growing economy, and they are bang on dot, and the full credit goes to the Prime Minister and the Union Finance Minister.
The Income Tax Department registered a record number of filing of income tax returns till 31st of October 2023, which was the due date for filing of ITRs for taxpayers not having any international or specified domestic transaction, in whose case books of account were required to be audited. India is also the country with the highest digital transaction, accounting for nearly 46% share as per the 2022 data. India is followed by Brazil, China, Thailand and South Korea. From just 1 billion transactions in 2016, UPI has since crossed the landmark 10 billion transactions. As of February 2023, in the automobile market in India, two-wheelers and passengers cars accounted for 77% and 18% market share during the year 2021-2022. India aims to double its auto industry size to Rs 15 lakh crores by the end of 2024. There has been an FDI inflow of $33.77 billion in the industry from April 2000 till September 2022, which is around 5.48% of the total FDI inflows in India during the same period. As on March 2023, 256,980 electric vehicles registered in India in 2023. India is poised to be the fastest growing economy in financial year 24.
Well, moving on, amid rising pollution levels in Delhi, the Commission for Air Quality Management has implemented restrictions in the capital. The Delhi Air Quality Index recorded in the severe category. To control the pollution, graded response action plan Stage 3 has been imposed in Delhi. It involves a complete halt on construction and demolition activities except the essential projects. All the schools in the city from class nursery to class 5 have been shut for the next 2 days, while in Gurugram, amid the worsening air quality, authorities issued order to strictly prohibit burning waste materials such as garbage, plastic and rubber. And for more on this, we have our correspondent Kriti Vadhera joining us. Well, Kriti, Delhi NCR's air quality, as we all know, is now very hazardous. Graded response action plan, that is GRAP 3, has kicked in as AQI turns very severe. How is all this being implemented?
Lepakshi, it's very bad a condition today morning here in National Capital Region. Right behind me, you can see this is central Delhi we are standing in, and it is completely blurred. And, 500 meters away from here also, it's so hazy and the smog is surrounded in entire National Capital Region. Schools, as you said, are shut from pre-primary till primary level, and GRAP 3, the stage 3 of GRAP has been imposed in Delhi. It's a complete shut on construction sites, and the commercial vehicles entering in Delhi NCR region have been put on a restriction upon, and severe measures are being taken by the government for the anti-smog guns to sprinkle water on roads. This is the situation in Delhi. It's being very dangerous for the children and the elderly as well. And people with chronic diseases, respiratory disorders are advised to stay inside homes, and it's bad a condition for everyone around.
Right, Kriti. Also, Delhi, we know, is choking. Have you been able to see any people walking around in the morning, doing the daily chores? Have you been able to speak to everybody?
Yes, we met quite a few people, and it's a busy day, working day. People are moving on to work. They're bound to be in their offices. But still, I mean, we could see the smog around the capital region. You can see behind me, the camera person is showing you. But still, Delhi is struggling to be on, its regular routine.
Right, Kriti. Thank you so much for that update from there. And moving on, still to come on DD India News Hour. Eldest Trump sons testify in fraud case aimed at their family business. China and the United States will meet to discuss nuclear arms control soon. Storm Ciaran wreaks havoc in Western Europe, claiming one life in Tuscany and train services halted.
Turning crisis into opportunity, transforming ideas into action, stories of real change, tales of sustainable solution. This series is going to tell stories of such change makers.
Watch Change Makers on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. Time now for a recap of the headlines. Moving on, the US and China are reportedly preparing to discuss nuclear arms control at a rare meeting next week. It would be the first time the two superpowers have sat down for talks since the Obama administration ended almost 7 years ago. Nick Harper reports from Washington.
Over the last few years, the Biden administration has grown increasingly worried and frustrated about a lack of communication with China over the issue of nuclear weapons. Beijing has reportedly shown little interest in discussing ways to reduce the risks of nuclear conflict. By US estimates, China has more than 500 warheads, but by 2030 the Pentagon says that it could have more than 1,000. Beijing, though, argues the US has far more, with an estimated arsenal of more than 3,700 warheads. It's not anticipated that these talks would be the start of formal negotiations on how to set nuclear limits. Washington, though, and Moscow have previously had the New START Treaty, which sets limits on how many warheads both countries can deploy. Although amid the war in Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that his country had suspended participation in the treaty. The expected US-China meeting comes off the back of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit to Washington and ahead of the expected visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping to the APEC summit in San Francisco later this month. US-China diplomatic engagements have ramped up in recent months, with trips to Beijing for a number of top US officials, including Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. Nick Harper in Washington, reporting for DD India.
And for more on this, we are now joined by our correspondent Andrew Wood. Well, Andrew, China and the United States will reportedly discuss nuclear arms control next week, as US says China is expanding nuclear arsenal much faster than expected. But on the other hand, Beijing has long argued that the US already has a much larger arsenal. Will this bring strategic stability?
Well, I think America worries that it might get trapped in a three-way arms race, with nuclear arms race, with China and also Russia. As we heard earlier, Russia is rather reluctant to take arms control seriously at the moment. China in the past has not, because it says it has so few warheads. Arms control agreements with Russia, or the former Soviet Union as well, have had quite a big effect on the number of nuclear weapons in the world. 30 years ago, the number of nuclear weapons that Russia, the Soviet Union and America had was numbered in the tens of thousands. I think at one point Russia had around about 30,000 nuclear weapons, warheads and so on. It now only has about 6,000, and it depends whether you count warheads that are ready to be deployed at a moment's notice and those that are in storage. If you do count those two, then America and Russia are roughly equal at about 6,000. But with China at 500, China is not that interested. I think that what will happen on Monday is, an attempt to try to stabilize relations. The arms control people from China and America who will be meeting are also the non-proliferation team as well. So they presumably will want to talk about ways to stop nuclear weapons spreading, perhaps Iran getting them and so on. But it's probably more about discussions about talks. I don't think China is ready yet to look at ways to limit the size of its nuclear arsenal. But the fact that there is now, or from Monday anyway, there will be a channel of communication open is probably going to, well, perhaps ease the minds of people in Washington a bit.
Right. Also, Andrew, separate talks on maritime affairs and other issues can come up. Can South China Sea also come up in the discussion?
I expect so. The South China Sea is a very important sea lane, not so much for America, but certainly for its allies in Europe, as so much of the world's trade passes through the South China Sea, starting, say, from the Straits of Singapore in the south, going through the South China Sea to China, and also to Korea and Japan and Taiwan as well. And of course, China claims 90% of the South China Sea as its own, going right the way down to Indonesia and Malaysia, the island of Borneo, which is almost on the equator. Nobody else and international bodies recognize this. So that's an area that it's difficult to see how there could be any form of compromise on this, because China claims it owns it. Everybody else, especially America, says it doesn't. And America also is an ally of the Philippines, particularly at the moment. And the Philippines and China have been having clashes in the South China Sea over disputed areas. The other area is probably going to be Taiwan.
Okay, right. Andrew, also there have been a lot of China-US diplomatic engagements in recent months, as we all know, largely at Washington's request. Does it salvage what were rapidly deteriorating ties between the two countries?
Well, it certainly stabilized them. As you say, they've been rapidly deteriorating over this year. Remember, back at the start of the year, there was the Chinese spy balloon. America said it was a spy balloon. China said it was a meteorological balloon that flew through American airspace and that America ended up shooting down. That really destroyed a lot of goodwill between America and China. And since August, we've had these American senior politicians, or since July, American senior politicians visiting China. There haven't been any breakthroughs, but the fact that they're talking to each other is definitely important. A couple of weeks ago, President Xi Jinping said that climate change, or preventing climate change, was one of the few bright spots in relations between America and China. And given that America and China's climate envoys are due to meet soon, that's a good sign too. And perhaps if the summit, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco in the middle of this month goes ahead, and President Xi Jinping and President Biden meet, they might be able to, well, announce something that looks good on climate change. Because remember, America and China are the two biggest emitters of pollution. that causes climate change. And if they can't agree on how to reduce that, then there's probably not much chance for the rest of the world to agree.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Andrew, from Hong Kong. And moving on, Eric Trump, like his brother Donald Trump Jr., testified on Thursday that he had no knowledge of the allegedly tampered with documents. In a New York court, Donald Trump and his two sons are accused of inflating the value of houses and other assets in order to gain better credit terms. Jody Jacobs is reporting from New York.
Both Eric and Donald Trump Jr. have told the court here in New York that they were not involved in the questionable valuations. These are questionable valuations that now threaten to crumble their father's real estate empire. Eric and Trump Jr. were in charge of the business empire while their father served as president from 2017 to 2021. They have blamed accountants, claiming they are the ones that assembled the financial statements that were used to secure loans and insurance. Eric Trump even went further, saying he was not even aware that such documents even existed. Email proof was presented in court which painted a different picture, but neither vouched for the accuracy of the documents in question. The judge has already ruled that Trump, his two adult sons, and the company fraudulently inflated the asset values. Trump's former lawyer Michael Cohen has also testified that Trump directed them to exaggerate the value of their assets, like the Trump Tower in Manhattan. The former U.S. president has denied any wrongdoing in his criminal and civil cases and has accused the Attorney General and the judge of political bias. This is a miscarriage of justice, he wrote on social media on Thursday. Trump himself is set to testify on Monday, the latest in many courtroom appearances for the former president. Jody Jacobs in New York, reporting for DD India.
Well, moving on, Storm Ciaran claimed one life in the Tuscany region of Italy on Thursday, including 6 others in Western Europe, as the storm follows the path of destruction. Earlier, dozens were also left injured due to torrential rain and strong gust of winds. Houses are damaged and facing power outages. Various schools are closed. Airlines and train companies have also halted their services. Residents of northwesternmost region of Brittany, Italy, are also advised to stay at home. And around 350 people had to be evacuated as a result of wildfire that blazed close to the coastal town of Gandia in the Valencia area of eastern Spain, according to the authorities. Over 34 crew were fighting the fire close to the village of Monticelvo, but strong winds made it difficult to put out the flames from the air, according to emergency services. Firefighters from all throughout the Valencia region were called in to put out the fire, and the regional government announced that they have requested assistance from the military emergency unit. And the Kibichevskaya Sopka volcano in Russia that erupted on Wednesday will continue for some time. Local authorities had issued a red alert and warning for aviation as well as nearby residents. On Thursday, the Kamchatka branch of Unified Geophysical Service of the Russian Academy of Sciences said that most likely the eruption will continue for some time, though the intensity and frequency of the eruption will be decreased as days pass. And now let's take a look at other stories making news around the world. Final results from New Zealand's October 14 general election are going to be released on Friday. Prime Minister-elect Christopher Luxon had positive talks with the leaders of ACT New Zealand and New Zealand First, who are expected to govern the country in a 3-party coalition with Luxon's National Party. Luxon added that he cannot guarantee the timing for when the final negotiations will be done. Duane Kefiti Davis, charged in the 1996 murder of hip-hop star Tupac Shakur, pleaded not guilty on Thursday in a Las Vegas court. The former gang member was indicted in September this year and arrested in Las Vegas for Shakur's drive-by shooting death. FBI agents searched the home of New York City Mayor Eric Adams' chief election campaign fundraiser, Brianna Smuggs. She was later questioned by public corruption investigators. Mexicans celebrated the Day of the Dead in Zinzonzan Cemetery by lighting candles that illuminated the area. Family members also held vigils and placed flowers, pictures and other items at family graves. The Day of the Dead is one of the most deeply rooted traditions in Mexico, celebrated by millions of Mexicans from all walks of life. Representative of Colombia's National Liberation Army informed the group will free the father of Liverpool football star Luis Diaz as soon as possible. Diaz's parents were kidnapped last week. His mother, Selenis Maralunda, was freed within hours. Earlier in an official statement, the government had confirmed that the National Liberation Army rebels were responsible for the kidnapping. And still to come on DD India News Hour. Former crypto tycoon Sam Bankman-Fried found guilty on all counts at fraud trial. World's first artificial intelligence summit in UK concludes on the need to seek global consensus on mitigating risk. UK announces a global hub to test AI models in order to ensure their safety. It was a well-articulated revenge as India demolished Sri Lanka by 302 runs, confirming their semi-final berth. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News. I'm Lepakshi Ciaran. And moving on, former FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried has been found guilty by a New York jury on all 7 counts of fraud, embezzlement and criminal conspiracy. The panel reached its decision after 5 weeks of trial, Bankman of fraud, embezzlement and criminal conspiracy. The month-long trial had been an ordeal for Fried after some of his closest associates testified that he was key to all the decisions that saw $8 billion vanished from his FTX trading platform. Fried's defense lawyers, who objected to several rulings, are expected to appeal the verdict. And in business news, Wall Street's 3 main stock indexes closed sharply high on Thursday on hopes that the U.S. Federal Reserve has reached the end of its interest rate hiking campaign. The S&P 500 gained 1.89% to end at 4,317.78 points. Meanwhile, the Nasdaq Composite gained 1.78% to 13,294.19. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 1.70% to 33,839.08. The Fed held interest rates steady on Wednesday, while Chair Jerome Powell left the door open to further tightening. Well, the UK has announced a global hub to test AI models in order to ensure their safety. The AI Safety Institute was launched as a 2-day summit comes to an end at Bletchley Park, which has been attended by government officials from 28 countries as well as leading tech figures. Julia Chapman reports for more.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak hailed this as a landmark achievement, the idea being that new frontier AI models will be tested before being rolled out. It is the first time AI companies have agreed to this, but it will be a voluntary arrangement. Now, that will come under some criticism, but British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says there is buy-in from some of the largest companies in the world, including Google DeepMind and OpenAI. So certainly this is one of the major outcomes of the 2-day summit, following on from the joint declaration signed by 28 countries, including the US and China. And in his press conference, Rishi Sunak defended the invitation of China, saying some critics said he shouldn't have invited China to participate, others saying that even if he did, there wouldn't be any kind of agreement with China. But ultimately, the outcome was that there is a joint declaration signed by all countries countries. And he said it was important that all the leading nations in the field of AI were participating in this conversation. So moving forward, there will be an intergovernmental panel looking at the risks of AI, similar to the one that there is for climate change, another major global threat. And the hope is that this will start a regular conversation. There will be summits like this one every 6 months, with the next one in South Korea 6 months from now and in France in a year's time. Julia Chapman at Bletchley Park, reporting for DD India.
You're watching DD India News. Time now for some sports news. India demolished Sri Lanka by 302 runs at the iconic Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai to qualify for the semi-finals, and that too with a dominating performance, ensuring a scoreline of 7-0 at the group stage edition.
India demolished Sri Lanka at the iconic Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai to qualify for the semi-finals, and that too with a dominating performance, ensuring a scoreline of 7-0 at the group stage. India's lethal bowling attack led from the front to restrict Team Sri Lanka. This is one of the lowest scores that Sri Lanka made at Cricket World Cup in ODI format. Sri Lanka completely failed to chase a target of 358 runs set by Team India. If we talk about Team India, Shubman Gill top scored with 92 runs, while Virat Kohli missed his 49th ODI ton after he was dismissed at 88. Had Kohli slammed 100 today, he would have equalled Sachin Tendulkar's record of 49 centuries in one-day internationals. Nonetheless, Kohli did reach 1001 milestone in ODI format in a calendar year for 8th time now. On the other hand, Siraj silenced all the critics, taking 3 wickets while Shami took 4. Together, a stupendous bowling performance by Team India completely dominated the game at the Wankhede Stadium. India is now all set and too confident to face South Africa on the 5th of November. Taposh Bhattacharya.
Well, fans also expressed their joy in India's historic and splendid victory at Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai.
India has won the match against Sri Lanka, and it's a very thorough performance. I have with me some of the fans who are here. Sir, how was the match?
The match was excellent. I have never seen such a match, and I think it is the lowest score of Sri Lanka against India.
What about you, sir?
So I came here for North America, US. We love the match. And amazing bowlers. Love the bowlers. We come from California. We were there in England in 2019. I hope we've learned the lessons and we don't get too arrogant and too confident. We have to win at home. The cup is our one this time.
Ma'am, you are here with the kids.
I'm here to support my husband and my kids who are crazy fans, and they've enjoyed it.
And you enjoyed the match?
Yeah.
So, who you were rooting for? Kohli, Rohit Sharma, who?
Shami.
Shami.
Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi also poured his heartfelt wish on India's 7th win in the tournament. He posted on X, Team India is unstoppable in the World Cup. Congratulations to the team on a stellar victory against Sri Lanka. It was a display of exceptional teamwork and tenacity. And now let's take a look at the points table after India wins. India occupies the top spot, unbeaten so far with 7 wins in 7 matches. They have 14 points, while South Africa occupies the 2nd spot. While Afghanistan will clash with Netherlands at the Ikana Cricket Stadium in Lucknow today, both Afghanistan and the Netherlands are coming into the clash on the back of brilliant wins in their previous games. Afghanistan took on Sri Lanka in their previous game, in which Afghanistan managed to register a 7-wicket win. On the other hand, the Netherlands took on Bangladesh in their last game and defeated the side by 87 runs. Well, that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. Let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Nipakshi Khurana from all of us here in Delhi. Thanks for watching DD India News Hour.